The Pope has issued one of his clearest warnings yet about the direction of international diplomacy surrounding the war in Ukraine. Speaking in Castel Gandolfo after meeting Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky, Pope Leo XIV said that any effort to negotiate peace without the full involvement of Europe is unrealistic and risks undermining a decades-long transatlantic partnership. On Tuesday, the pontiff stated that Europe must remain central to discussions aimed at ending the conflict, emphasizing that the war is occurring on European soil and that security guarantees for the future cannot exclude European actors. Earlier, the Pope welcomed President Zelensky to his residence in Castel Gandolfo. Images from Vatican media show the two leaders greeting each other, exchanging gifts, and holding a formal meeting discussing developments in Ukraine and ongoing international efforts toward a settlement. During the encounter, Pope Leo XIV underscored concerns about recent comments made by U.S. President Donald Trump regarding Europe. He warned that such remarks could weaken a strategic alliance that has long shaped security cooperation between the United States and Europe. In footage from the day, Zelensky is seen seated with the pontiff, engaging in discussions about the military, humanitarian, and diplomatic situation in Ukraine. The Pope said he had reviewed parts of the latest U.S. proposal aimed at ending the conflict, but had not yet read it in full. In his comments to reporters, Pope Leo XIV said the proposal contains elements that, in his view, signal a major departure from what he described as a historic alliance between the United States and Europe. He cautioned that statements about Europe made by President Trump appear to challenge that alliance at a particularly sensitive moment. The Pope's remarks follow a recent interview in which President Trump described Europe as weak and decadent in relation to immigration and Ukraine. Those comments deepened tensions between Washington and European capitals and triggered a renewed discussion about the role Europe should play in peace negotiations. In a separate appearance in Washington on December 8th, President Trump reiterated his views, saying, "Look, Europe has to be very careful. They're doing a lot of things. We want to keep Europe, Europe. Europe is going in some bad directions. It's very bad for the people. We don't want Europe to change so much. They're going in some very bad directions." In Castel Gandolfo, Pope Leo XIV responded indirectly, stressing that Europe's unity remains essential, especially in the context of a war occurring within the continent. Speaking in Italian, he said, "I think Europe's role is very important, and the unity of European countries is truly significant, especially in this case. Seeking a peace agreement without including Europe in the discussions is not realistic. The war is in Europe, and I believe that the security guarantees being sought today and for the future must involve Europe. Unfortunately, not everyone sees it this way, but I think there is a very great opportunity here for Europe's leaders to come together and seek solutions jointly." The Pope made clear that the responsibility for shaping a long-term peace framework belongs to actors directly affected by the conflict, and that Europe cannot be sidelined in efforts to stabilize the region. His comments reflect broader concerns from European governments about potential shifts in U.S. strategy under President Trump's new administration. In additional remarks delivered in English, Pope Leo XIV said, "I haven't read the whole thing. I think, unfortunately, some of the parts that I have seen make a huge change in what was, for many, many years, a true alliance between Europe and the United States. The remarks that are made about Europe, also, in interviews recently, I think are trying to break apart what I think needs to be a very important alliance today and in the future. It is a program that President Trump and his advisors put together, and he is the president of the United States and has the right to do that. It has a number of things in it that I think, while perhaps many people in the United States would be in agreement, I think many others would see things in a different way." European officials have expressed concern about the implications of Washington's evolving policy direction. The United Kingdom's Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, speaking in London on December 8th, reaffirmed Europe's commitment to Ukraine. Starmer said, "The principles remain, the principles that we've been working on for a very, very long time, which is that we stand with Ukraine, and if there's to be a ceasefire, it needs to be a just and lasting ceasefire. And that's why it's so important that we repeatedly set out a principle that matters about Ukraine or for Ukraine." The UK government maintains that any political settlement must meet conditions acceptable to Kiev and reflect Ukraine's right to determine the terms of any agreement. London has repeatedly emphasized the integrity of European borders, and the rules-based international order remains central to its policy. In recent weeks, diplomatic attention has intensified as global actors assess the feasibility of a negotiated end to the conflict. President Trump's latest plan, which has not been fully made public, has triggered debate both in Europe and the United States. Critics argue that elements of the proposal could shift burdens away from Washington and require Europe to take on expanded responsibilities. Supporters contend that it's time for Europe to assume a larger role. The Pope's remarks come amid this broader context, highlighting the potential consequences of excluding regional actors from discussions. He stressed that Europe must be part of any lasting framework, and that unity among European countries remains essential for long-term security. Footage from Castel Gandolfo shows Pope Leo XIV departing the papal residence earlier in the day. The images underscore the symbolic weight of his location, a historic retreat used by previous pontiffs during moments of reflection and significant engagement with world leaders. As Europe reassesses its relationship with the United States, the Pope's warning adds to a growing list of voices calling for European cohesion and a more prominent diplomatic posture. Analysts say the Pope's comments reflect concerns about the weakening of transatlantic cooperation at a moment when unity remains critical. President Zelensky's visit to Italy is part of broader diplomatic outreach as Ukraine continues to seek international support. The Ukrainian president has emphasized the urgency of maintaining defense assistance, humanitarian backing, and political solidarity, especially as winter conditions intensify and frontline operations continue. The Vatican has played a limited but notable role in past mediation efforts, offering humanitarian access and diplomatic channels, though it does not officially serve as a party to political negotiations. Pope Leo XIV's intervention underscores the Vatican's intention to highlight principles rather than propose specific political solutions. In describing Europe's role, the Pope reiterated that the continent has both a moral and strategic obligation to participate fully in discussions. His warning suggests concern that parallel negotiations lacking European involvement could produce outcomes that fail to address long-term security needs. President Trump's characterization of Europe in recent interviews has amplified tension between Washington and European capitals. His remarks describing the continent as weak and decadent were widely circulated and prompted both public and private responses from European officials, reaffirming the importance of collective action. The latest developments reflect a widening debate over the future of Western security architecture, particularly the strength of the U.S.-Europe relationship. European governments are reevaluating their defense spending, strategic priorities, and role in international diplomacy, noting that the conflict in Ukraine has fundamentally reshaped security realities. As diplomatic initiatives continue across capitals, Europe's participation remains a central point of contention. The Pope's statements once again elevate the question of whether peace efforts can succeed without cooperation among European states, the United States, and Ukraine. The day's footage concludes with additional remarks from President Trump, repeating his earlier warning that Europe must be cautious in its policy direction. In his words, "Look, Europe has to be very careful. They're doing a lot of things. We want to keep Europe, Europe. Europe is going in some bad directions. It's very bad for the people. We don't want Europe to change so much. They're going in some very bad directions." The remarks underline the divide between Washington's current messaging and the concerns raised by European leaders and the Pope. As the conflict in Ukraine continues, these differences are shaping the broader diplomatic landscape and influencing the prospects for negotiations. The situation remains fluid, with discussions ongoing among Ukraine's partners, European governments, and the United States. Pope Leo XIV's warning adds a significant voice to the ongoing debate about the structure of future peace efforts and the importance of European involvement. The international community now faces a complex diplomatic environment, with divergent visions emerging between Washington, Europe, and other global actors over how to achieve a sustainable settlement in Ukraine.